Hi, this is The Burning Question. My name is Peter. This is a fun show because we have someone who's outside of the normal realm of biochar and operating in a very different environment. Eloise Buckland is the founder and CEO of Husk Ventures. Thanks for coming on, and I'm really excited to chat with you today.
Thanks so much for inviting me, Peter.
So why don't you talk a little bit about how and why you started Husk?
Okay, thank you. So I started Husk with co-founder Carol Rios 2.5 years ago. And my background is sustainability and social innovation. Hers was business. And very briefly, we decided we wanted to do something with scale and impact. So we wanted to create a new social enterprise and set out on a mission to find a low-value agricultural byproduct that we could add value to and support smallholder farmers in the process.
Ha, I've got an idea.
Yeah. Yeah, so it took us about 1.5 years to work out that what we really should do is take rice husk, of which there are 150 million tons produced every year, and turn it into biochar, which is what farmers have been doing for thousands of years, and sell this back to smallholder farmers in the form of carbon-based fertilizers and other biochar-based products. So that's what we do. We transform rice husk into biochar products to regenerate soils, because obviously 1/3 of the planet is degraded and that's increasing, but also to sequester carbon. So 1.33 tons of carbon sequestered for every ton of biochar that we produce, and to support smallholders' livelihoods by increasing their yields, increasing their revenues. And these guys, I say, we're talking about 2 billion people on the planet, grow most of the world's food. So I think it's important that they have soil to grow that food in.
Absolutely. So where do you guys operate now? How big are you? What's your current kind of scale and operations?
Okay, we're still pretty tiny in the grand scheme of things. We've basically been bootstrapping in Cambodia for the last 2 years. So we've got an operation up and running. We use a pyrolysis continuous flow technology there, and we are based inside a rice mill. So that's kind of our USP, is that we've got the technology in the rice mill. So we use the rice husk at its point of source and transform that into biochar-based products. And to date, we've made nearly 200 tons of biochar, and we've sold nearly 200 tons of biochar. We're constantly sold out, which is a good sign.
Yeah, definitely.
And we've sequestered just a little over that 250 tons of carbon. So that carbon, interestingly, stays in the soil. And for those of you who are not familiar with the IPCC report on this, it stays in the soil for at least 100 years. So, and some say it stays for longer. We think we've reached about 400 farming families in Cambodia in the last 2 years, in this kind of proof of concept stage. So we currently have a team in Cambodia, and then we also have people in Europe and in the US. We're kind of all, a lot of us are working online as well at the moment. But we're pretty small, and we'd really like to get bigger. So I'll come back to that.
Yeah. Well, so I mean, there are a bunch of interesting pieces about your story. I think one of them is that you're selling out of biochar is I would say an outlier relative to most people in agricultural communities, say in the United States. Biochar is not a highly used or high in demand product. And so what makes Cambodia different, and how have you been able to do that?
Okay, yeah, I think, sorry, just putting my phone on silent. I think the key is that the Cambodians understand biochar because it's a very fresh technology. And until very recently, and in some cases still today, Cambodian farmers will make their own biochar from rice husk. So they'll actually just create a pile of rice husk, put a metal tube in the top, light it in the middle, and then effectively cook the biochar. And in fact, the language in Khmer is sometimes called cooked biochar, cooked rice husk. That's the word for biochar. Cooked rice husk. Yeah. So this is what traditionally farmers would do. They make their own biochar with the rice husk after it's been separated from the grain at the mill. And then they put it on the soil, and they say this makes soil soft, because they have a lot of very hard, sticky clay there. The challenge is, though, that now this is no longer possible because through industrialization, most farmers don't have these small village mills, and now the mill for their rice is far away, so they don't have access to this husk. So they end up buying cheap Chinese fertilizer, which arrives at the little local depot, and they don't have their ready-made, traditional soil softener.
Right.
So that's why we've decided to go to the rice mills and give the farmers back something that they already know. And they know it so well that it's actually a kind of range of different type words for the different qualities of biochar in Khmer.
Fascinating.
So just chung on kam is just, which I pronounce terribly, and if any Cambodian
we won't judge you.
Still can't pronounce it. But chung on kam is just cooked rice husk, which is biochar straight up. And then we have pe on kam, which is ashy biochar. So, the Cambodians differentiate. If your biochar is a little bit ashy and it's not so high in carbon, then they know that it's ashy biochar. So, it's very much alive in the language. And this is why it's relatively easy to sell a farmer a product that he knows, understands. And now it comes in a bag to his rural depot rather than him having to cook it for 8 hours. So, yeah, it's quite an interesting setup.
And so people, the people that are farming have an understanding of obviously the idea that it softens their soil, improves their soil. Like on the scale of things, are they trying to get back to biochar? Like if you offer it and you offer them fertilizer, are they using some of both? How do people think about it? They're like, at last, biochar, or or is it like, oh, okay, cool? Like, how do they think about it, and how does that? Just like the cultural capital that biochar accumulated for I don't know how long by them doing this is very interesting. How that, I mean, it just doesn't exist. For example, in the United States, there's no one saying, at last, I can have biochar again. And it's,
yes, there is definitely, there's a kind of sense of modernization. So now when they can buy biochar in a bag, and the packaging and the branding is really important. It needs to look good, it needs to feel good. And in fact, sometimes we've had unbranded bags for a batch has gone wrong or whatever, and the farmers don't want just the white unbranded bags. They want the bag that says Husk on it, that says the NPK, the carbon content, because this is modernizing farming. And so there's a real acceptance to this. And we're actually, so our products, we have basic organic biochar because we use organic certified rice, but we also have carbon-based fertilizer. And this is even more convenient because obviously with the basic biochar, as you ideally want to charge that with nutrients, compost, manure, whatever the farmer has available. And that's, again, more work. So now we've got a product which is carbon-based fertilizer, which is mixed with nutrients. So it's literally ready to go on the soil. And we've done around 20 trials across 12 provinces of Cambodia in the last couple of years. And we're getting an average yield increase of 29% on the first cycle with the product. So, this is potentially between 15 and 25% more revenue for the farmer. So we've taken into consideration the cost of the biochar. It's comparable to other organic fertilizers. So it's a competitive price. And in some cases, yields have more than doubled. So this means extra revenue for the farmer. So we feel like, we've really got something here. We've proven a concept, but really right now, to be frank, what we need is a bigger machine. We need to scale this up, and that's where we're headed next.
Okay, well, so talk to me about that. What is scaling up in Cambodia look like at 200 tons now? Seems exciting from a proof of concept standpoint, but from a real scale standpoint, it's kind of from a carbon sequestration standpoint, I'm like, okay, it's cool, but how do we get to the next level? Like, what does that look like? And can you do that in Cambodia, or would you need to grow geographically?
Sure. So where we are now is we've actually just opened our first fundraise, first round of investment, and we are getting angel investors on board. We're seeking $600,000, which is basically to ramp up our production in Cambodia to be able to produce 1,000 tons a year within the next 2 years of biochar. And also develop an international licensing model. So this means that we can start sharing the knowledge that we've gained over the last 2 years working on this with other organizations around the world, because rice is not just grown in Cambodia, obviously. And there are some interesting other countries that also have this kind of access to this ancestral knowledge that's not so distant. So in Egypt, for example, there's also a kind of recent memory of making biochar from rice husk.
Huh.
And the same in the South Mediterranean, in Morocco. So, there's plenty of option for scaling and replicating. Rice is grown across Asia, but also Latin America, Mediterranean, many parts of Africa. So this is what we're doing with this first round of investment will enable us to just get Cambodia up and running with a bigger machine to start having an impact. This is the next couple of years.
Yep.
Beyond that, then we feel that we've got something that is really viable and scalable, and we go for further funding to replicate this more broadly across Southeast Asia. And the long-term vision is, if we could if those 150 million tons of rice husk that are produced every year around the world, if we could just turn 1% of those into biochar, we'd be able to sequester 1 million tons of carbon. So 1 million tons of carbon back in the soil by 2035. That's our vision. So we've got but we're starting small. We've done the 200. Now we just need to get to the next level. So we can have a viable unit in Cambodia, and then longer term go for the 1 million tons of carbon back in the soil. That's the plan.
Yeah, that's exciting. So when you think about obviously financing is an issue. When you do you have the pyrolysis lined up, or the community? What's the complicated part of this other than raising funding?
That's definitely challenge number one is raising the funding, because we've got the team in place.
Yeah.
The market is proved to be ready. We've got distributors so we sell B2B. We don't sell directly to the farmers. So
you sell to what in the US would be like an agway. It's like an ag store where farmers go already.
Sure, or even the distributor that sells to the store. It depends on how big the store is. Yeah, so there's some, and cooperatives. So there's a lot of agricultural cooperatives. One of them we have, one of our agricultural cooperative partners, they reach 75,000 farmers, and we just don't have the product right now for 75,000 farmers. But we work with them on trainings, demo farms, so they get the biochar out to their farmers. And other input suppliers and national distributors. So we've got the distribution, there. We've got a team, and basically what we need is the finance to buy this bigger machine. We've got a technology partner in Cambodia that can provide the ongoing R&D and maintenance to really refine what it is to make biochar from rice husk, because it's not totally obvious. We've learned a lot in the last couple of years. And I think really, at this point, with the fundraise, we're set to go. So we really hope to close this by the end of the year. So 2021, we're up and running more seriously.
That's exciting. So returning to the farmer side of it, how much do they apply, and how do they decide that? And do you help them, or how does that fit in?
Yeah, sure. So with the biochar, we're applying 1 kilo per meter squared. So we've mostly been focusing on vegetable crops, horticulture. So and this is an affordability issue. The rice farmer is really the poorest. They're the bottom of the pile. Unfortunately, they might be earning like $2.50 a day. Whereas if you're growing vegetables, then you might be on $5 a day.
Right.
So, and you've got a smaller plot. So maybe you've got around 6,000 meters squared. So a kilo per meter squared is what the vegetable farmers are using. We've had some really great results with pepper. So Cambodia is very well known for its pepper, red, green, black. It gets to the restaurants in Paris. It's really beautiful organic pepper. And that's 2 kilos per pole, because the pepper works in poles. So we've got different applications for different crops, and we're doing ongoing experiments with rice with some leading agricultural research organizations like CIRAD. And then, so our carbon-based fertilizer is slightly less. So that's at the moment 0.5 kilo per meter squared. And with all of these, this is on each cycle. So what is yet to be seen is the cumulative effect. We're seeing high yield increases on the first cycle. I think, to be honest, because the soil is so poor to start with. And we're assuming that will plateau off over time. But we're recommending at least 2 or 3 applications a year. So
interesting. Yeah, I'm very interested in knowing what the marginal return over time is, because one would assume that it would plateau, but at the same time,
Yeah.
We have reference points that says, no, it just kind of keeps going up. You just have to be patient. And that would be exciting.
Yeah, it would. I mean, to be, it is possible that you get the farmer to the stage where his soil really should be self-sufficient. So you've got enough carbon in there, you've got enough coral that attracts its own microorganisms, fungi, bacteria, that regulates its own moisture, that holds the nutrients, and you don't need to add any more. And that might take a year, it might take 2 years, it might take 3.
Right.
But to be honest, in terms of our business model, I really don't mind, given that there are 2 billion smallholder farmers out there. This is a huge market, and we are really open to others joining us on this journey, because I feel that most of the biochar experience and expertise, all the biochar meetings that I've been to, is Europe, US, Australasia, and even within Europe, it's kind of it's Switzerland, Germany. It's not even very present in Southern Europe, and this is something that works basically because farmers have been doing it for thousands of years. So it's just a question of finding a viable business model, from my perspective, to scale this up. It's not, the technology is challenging, it's part of the story, but really it's just the viability of the business. And I think tapping into emerging markets, which are huge, understanding the distribution models, understanding the price points, what farmers can afford to pay, the gross margin per meter squared, because we're talking about cents, because this is people who are very price sensitive. And with that, I think we could make a real difference to soil regeneration and to climate change.
That's really exciting. I would love to go on, but I want to make sure these are short enough so that people will watch them. So why don't we wrap up here? But I guess, how do we follow along with your story, and how do we stay connected to this? I'll send out I'll attach to this interview a bunch of interesting conversations you've had. But how do we stay connected to this? It sounds like the next year and a half is going to be pretty exciting.
Great. Yeah. I mean, please visit our website, huskventures.com. We're also on Twitter, Husk Ventures, LinkedIn. Husk Ventures is the key to get to us.
Great.
And if you are interested in investing in biochar, then please reach out. Now is the time. We will also be doing. I am actually going to just sneakily do a publicity campaign. We are doing a Black Friday biochar campaign.
Amazing.
Selling some of our carbon removal credits for the 27th of November. So if you don't feel like buying stuff and you do feel like sinking carbon, then there's going to be something out there on huskventures.com.
That's exciting. So, and we didn't even really touch on this, but it sounds like you're proceeding down the path of getting carbon offsets done. So at some point, I'd love to check back in and see how that's been. I'm sure, it's easier to get the kind of certification process going on a super large, very technical facility. I'm very curious how hard it is, and if you're able to get all the certifying pieces set in a more kind of dynamic environment.
Great.
So would love to hear that story when we check back in sometime.
Okay, great. Thanks very much, Peter.
Well, thanks, Heloise. I really appreciate the time, and look forward to following what's going on in Cambodia and with Husk.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.